All right, welcome back. We are Comp 229 Web Application Development in the fall 2020 semester and beyond, and it's week 3, part 5 of our broadcast. We're talking about the Express generator and navigation. From a technical requirements perspective, you should have installed Bootstrap and the Font Awesome frameworks in the last video, and we've also put node modules as part of our path so that we can access jQuery and Bootstrap and Font Awesome with ease. We should also understand at this point that the Express generator creates or injects, composes a single page application. I'm just trying to look for the right word because it's not really a traditional HTML site at all. It's not that we have different pages. We have the same page with the same template and we're injecting different parts of it at the same time. And we'll talk about that in this video. What we're going to do this video is we're going to use Bootstrap and Font Awesome to create some interesting navigation that's a little bit appealing, more appealing than what we had before instead of typing it in by hand. And then what we're also going to do at the end of this video is you should understand how to use Express Generator to create a foundation for your assignment number 1, which is what this is all about. Let's get going. So where last we left off, I'm just going to run this thing again. So we're just going to use NodeMon here. Where last we left off, if we go to the page, you can see that if I refresh and if I go to a different page, I have to physically type in where I want to go. So I want to go to the contact page, I got to type it in. That's not as effective as having some kind of navigation scheme, like a main navigation. Instead of doing it ourselves, we want to go to Bootstrap and get it already done for us. I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to go to documentation, and then I'm going to go into components. And underneath the components, there is navs and navbar. Let's go to navbar. And the navbar component, if you scroll down, it gives us this big navbar example, which is going to look something that looks like this. That's kind of what I want. I want to pare it down, though. So I'm going to take this example and then cut parts out of it to make it our own. So let's copy this. Go back to our EJS template and then inject that navigation up here. So this is where our main nav is going to go. So main nav is going to go here. Okay. Now we see there's a bunch more in here. You can see that there's tons of content in here, and we have to kind of go through it and see what this does. If I was just to leave it the way it is right now and press save, and if I go back out to our page, here's our page, and press refresh, you can see now that we've got like a little navigation bar. It's kind of hard to see, especially since you're watching it remotely. You can see that there's links here, but they really don't do anything. All right, there's some stuff that we don't need to use. Okay, so this is kind of where we're at right now with our navigation. Let's put it back, and let's change some of the way this looks. So the one thing that we can do is we can change our navbar. So instead of using navbar light, background light, we can use navbar dark, background dark. Okay, so that's the first thing. If I just change that first thing on line 15 and I press save, and if I press over here refresh, you can see now that we have a dark navbar, which looks a lot better than what it was before. That's the first part. The next part is inside of our brand. We don't want it to be called navbar. Let's call this Comp229. Comp229 for now. Okay, we can change this brand later on when we make our own little store next week. Okay, cool. So we've got this. And we've got our button. This button is really, this part right here, it's really defining our little hamburger. I'm going to talk about what that hamburger looks like. If I go back to our page, and if I was to make this responsive, so let's say I was putting it on a small device, you can see that I have this little hamburger here that I would get automatically from Bootstrap. If I click on this thing, you can see that it'll bring down a drop down. So we can see it on multiple devices, not just on desktop devices, which is kind of cool. So that's what that little button is on between line 17 and line 19. That's the hamburger. Next, collapse navbar collapse. This is what allows us to collapse our navbar. MR auto is margins from the right, automatic. I want margins from the left, right, for our navigation. So we're going to change this to ML auto. And if I do this and press save, you can see now when I go back here, instead of our nav items being here, if I refresh, they go over here, which is where I want them. Okay. Okay, so that's what that did. That's what ML auto did. Here we have our links. So here's our first link. It's a home link. And you can see that the nav link has been set to active. And we also have this span class. We're going to get rid of the span class. We don't need this right now. We just need our home link. And in fact, we don't need pretty much any of this stuff all the way down to and including the bottom of this form. So from here down, other than a home link, I don't want anything else. Let's just get rid of it. So now our navigation is quite smaller. Okay, I'm just going to copy this home link for a second and put it in there. Our navigation for the home link is going to be, as you guessed it, /home. Okay, that's our home link. And we don't want to mark every link as active. Marking a link as active makes it highlight, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, but we want to change this one to the other sites. So this will be the About page. Home, About. These are our links. And this will be the products. Right? Services. And contact. 5 pages. 5-page site. So product, services, about, home. All these have to be named properly, as an example. And you notice that the navbar brand itself can be clickable. We can put just the slash, right, which takes us to our default home page. To make sure that these are good, let's check to see that the names here that we put in our links are the same as the ones we use in our routing. So in our routing, we just simply said index is home, about, products, services, contact. Those are the 5 pages here. We have our routes, and inside of our navigation, we have the same routes here in our navbar. All right, so we can go to each of the pages, and I'm using air quotes here when I say pages. There aren't different pages. There's the same page. We're just injecting different content. Again, hence the single page application thing that we talked about earlier. Okay. So if I go back out now to our page, and if I refresh, you can see now that it's where I want it to be. Home, about, products, services, and contact. If I click these buttons, it's going to take us to different parts of our page. It's going to look like we have a site that is a little bit more responsive than we had. If I click this actual comp229 brand, it'll take us back to the / the root of our page. And this is our test. We can later turn that into /home to be kind of consistent with the home link. Okay, cool. So this is this part. But it would be nice if we can inject some nicer icons to give us a little bit of flair, right? So let's go into Font Awesome. And in Font Awesome, let's find a couple of icons. The one I want to find is, not this one. The one I want to find in our Font Awesome is the home icon. Again, if you go to Font Awesome and type in home, then it'll take you to a bunch of different home icons. This is the typical house we can use, but we can use whatever we want. For this demonstration, we've been locked up at home because of COVID, so I'm just going to use Laptop House, this one, to indicate home. So when I click on the home, I'm going to grab this link by clicking on it, Laptop House. I'm going to go back into our VS Code, and right next to the home description of the link name, I'm going to paste it in. And what you're going to get is, I need a bit of a space there too, by the way. You need to put a space in between that. But you notice that there's an I tag with a class of FAS FA Laptop House. And this class is the Font Awesome library that we're referencing. Okay? These tags, all these other classes here are part of the Bootstrap framework that we're using to make our site look good. Again, this is not a CSS course, so we're using Bootstrap to make it look nice. And we're going to continue to do that throughout the semester. All right, so let's go back out to look at our page now. What do we have? So again, I'll go back to this, and I'm going to go here and refresh, and you can see now that I have a little icon next to home. If I want to make that icon larger, it's as simple as going here and just changing this to FA. So I want to make this large. So I can say FA-large, right? And let's go back there and refresh and see what we get. You can see that the house becomes a little bigger. We can also make it 2x and 3x. There's a bunch of other configurations, and you can get all those things by going to the Font Awesome site, and you can see that there are different sizes that you can choose. And if you hover over any of these things, for example, right now we're at large, but you can go to 2x. These are actual sizes, 3x, 5x, and so on. You can make them as big as one. They're all totally scalable. There's also other fonts that you can get if you paid for it. We're not using the paid for version of Font Awesome. We're just using the free version, so that's why we're using this one. Okay, fantastic. I want to add other icons here as well. So we want product, services, about, contact. For our contact, let's use info. All right, or that would be about, more like info. Info is not bad. It's a question mark. We can see something that's a little bit more interesting. So a user agent. User secret, if you want to do that. We can probably use that for something else. I don't think info, it makes sense for info. But let's just use, kind of an info circle or a question mark. I think the info circle might be pretty good to use. Let's just use that one. So I'm going to click on that one. I'm going to go here, just click on this, right? Go back to our code, and under our about, right, we're just going to Control V and paste. And you can see now we have our info circle in there. Okay, cool. Let's continue with that. Contact is going to be like a phone. Let's see if there's some kind of phone. Again, you can choose other ones for your site if you want to make it more interesting. I'm just going to use a mobile phone here for this one. Mobile Alt. And again, I'm just going to copy this into the contact area here. And products and services is kind of something up to you. For example, maybe what you want to do for services is use some kind of gear, and products some kind of map or something like that. Let's just do that. Again, I'm just going to go to the Font Awesome, so I'll say gear. And there's some gears, cogs, as an example. So that'll be like, services for me. You guys can also use something else that you want to use. And we'll put that in services. So that's the gear or the cog. And then what we also want to use is a map. I'm just using a map for products. Map, we can also use a grid. I think a grid might be better, like a grid of products. Something that looks like this. Or a menu, right? Because sometimes a menu might be a menu of products that I have going on. Sometimes they have some really interesting things that we can use here that might be interesting. Right, so that's not bad. An Elementor, that looks kind of neat. I'm going to use that. So Elementor, sure, and go back and just put that in. Cool. So notice that I had just make sure you have spaces in between all the names, and now it's going to make it look nice. Going back to our site now, if I refresh, you can see now that I have all of the icons, and it looks pretty good. Home, about, product, services, and contact. If I click on any one of these, they move, but this is where that active site thing is changing, right? Active site. You notice that I activated this one, but these ones don't really activate. Why? Because it's always going to be the same. It's always going to be home that's activated. The rest are inactive. We need to activate it with some code. First, let's fix this part, because this part looks really silly. Let's go to our nav bar, and just to make it look nicer, let's use a Jumbotron. That's typically what I use for this demo. So I'm going to grab this code here. So I went to Jumbotron under Bootstrap. I want to grab all this code here, copy it, and then go back to our code here. And where it says welcome, I'm just going to put a main content in there. Here's main. And I want to inject a Jumbotron. So I'm going to press, paste. There's our Jumbotron. But in our main, what I want also in there, and we're using semantic HTML for this, is I want to use a class of container, which is what I want to have for Bootstrap. So if I go class, let's put a container class in here, container. And what container does, it makes it kind of responsive to the edges. It doesn't take it right to the edges, but it looks pretty good. I want to use this welcome to the thing where it says instead of display for hello world, let's use welcome to the page that we have in here as well. So just kind of inject that right where it was before. We don't need all of these paragraph tags and everything else. We'll get rid of all this stuff because we don't need this right now. and we'll get rid of this h1 tag because now we've injected it or embedded it inside of a Jumbotron. Save, go back, and go to our site, refresh, and you can see now that we have welcome to the About page, welcome to the products page, the home page, the services page, the contact page, and it looks pretty good. If I go back to our code, so how was this done? Well, the container, if I go back to this, so here's container. The container actually gives me a little bit of margin on the left and margin on the right to make our page look pretty good. It creates this like gray area here for our Jumbotron, and then we inject our welcome or our main headline right here, which is a display 4. That's a Bootstrap style that we're using. All right, cool. So that's all that we've done here. We've created a pretty good navigation scheme. We still got things that are left to be done. One of the things that would be nice is if I could separate my navigation and my header, my main content, which is right in here. This is really our main content. And our footer, if I could separate all these three things into these little partial files, so I can compose my site and by little components, and I can have other templates in the future where I can use the same header, the same navigation, and the same footer, the same JavaScript code and whatever, but have different contents in the middle. All right, so I want to be able to do that, and we'll do that in the next video. We'll also fix up that little nav link active problem, right, which is what we have in here. Okay, so let's stop recording now, and we'll get to the next video.